what I read from your report in the Washington Times is that it's not if, it's not even when, it's that they're coming on in the next 3 to 6 months, and they seem certain of this. Is this CYA, or do they have fresh information, Eli? Can we guess?
Well, let me first of all say it was an extraordinary moment. I have covered the annual threat assessment hearings from the intelligence community for a very, very long time now. And I have never quite seen a moment where the very first question from the chairman, Senator Dianne Feinstein, and I want to quote this because what is the likelihood of another terrorist attempted attack on the U.S. homeland in the next 3 to 6 months, high or low? And the response from Dennis Blair, deferred to by the leadership of the intelligence community, is an attempted attack. The priority is certain, I would say. And then she then goes to everybody sitting next to him, from Leon Panetta to the director of the FBI, Robert Mueller, to Ron Burgess of the DIA, then to John Dinger, the acting assistant secretary for intelligence and research at the State Department. And all of them say yes without equivocation. So it was kind of it was a really chilling moment in a way. And if you read through the testimony today on the nature of the threat, they are conceding that the old view, which was that Al-Qaeda always wanted to attack the United States, the continental United States, but didn't have the capability, is out the window. The new view is that they have that capability, and we're doing everything we can to try to stop them.
Jeremy, because I'm going to ask a leading question here, answer what you can. Would you say that from your experience, and you're traveling around the world, and you work for another country, a friendly country, but in any event, very involved in combat, and have been involved in combat in the Middle East and the theater for many years, and you've served in the Air Force for several years, so you know how to handle a question that's leading like this. Would you say that the assessment of the Director of National Intelligence, Dennis Blair, a retired admiral, that an attack on the mainland United States in the next 3 months is certain, would you say that that is consistent with your information in Australian intelligence?
Well, certainly, John. The best way to probably answer this is the fact that it is coming from such a senior individual, and there has been given a very specific time frame. We're talking 3 to 6 months here, so certainly there is something credible. Otherwise, there would be no way in the world that they would give this information out so publicly. So what I think at this time is what you are hearing is that there is likely some information to deem credible an attack in 3 to 6 months. Whether or not that attack happens or not is by the by, because often things change and often anti-terror measures do work. But I think, certainly from what I understand and certainly from what I've read in the story, this is a fairly credible story. I think there is certainly some air of threat right there.
Eli, I know they didn't tell us when and where and how to prepare and all of that, but at this point, there doesn't seem to be any politics in this today. These men are responsible to respond to the questions asked by the chair of the committee. So how did the senators respond to this? What did they say publicly while the testimony was going on?
Well, the couple things that I picked up is that there was reference to Al-Qaeda seeking and its capability with regards to chemical and biological weapons. And they decided that they had to only answer that question in classified session, which means that there may be some new intelligence that we know, and there obviously was risk that they did not want to sort of publicize that. The second thing I would say is that I'm hearing that an element of the new threat is that an imam named Al-Laki, who is an American citizen and then went to Yemen, is unique for Al-Qaeda because he radicalizes as a jihadist religious authority in the English language, opening up a whole realm of people on the Internet, some of whom are homegrown, are U.S. citizens themselves, and basically then radicalizing them. So before you'd have chat rooms, but those chat rooms would be in Pashtun, they would be in Arabic, but now you might see the prospect of jihadist chat rooms in English. And who knows where those English speakers are from. They could be Nigerians, they could be Americans, and we know that Al-Awlaki is also linked to the Fort Hood figure, Major Hassan Nadal, as well as Abdul Muttalib, as well as the Arkansas shooter at the recruitment station a few months back.
This is, and I explained to Jeremy, who's just come back from the Ummah, al-Balawi is a New Mexico-born Yemenite. His parents were Yemenites. They came to America. He went to the Colorado State, I believe, or Colorado Engineering School. You've probably seen a file on him. He's in Yemen, we believe, at one of the terror camps that are out of reach of the Yemeni government. And his primary use, I'm told, and Eli, I pass this on to you because this is not secure, it's just information. His primary use is that he is an English speaker, a comfortable English speaker. And so he has recruited English speakers changing mode. Eli, is this related to the general threat out of Yemen about a female using a Western passport changing mode? Did they connect that today in the testimony?
I did not hear anything on that, and I was there for the whole testimony. It may come up tomorrow before the House Intelligence Committee.
Jeremy, I ask you, because that's a general alert threat I've had out of India, out of Indian intelligence, about a female carrying a Western passport as a possible weapon used against the United States. Can you say anything about that, Jeremy?
Certainly not specifically about that case, John. In fact, I haven't heard the specifics, but what it does sound like, and what I certainly can say, is it sounds like the use of clean recruits, individuals who would not normally come up on security panels or would not come up in threat assessments because they don't fit the profile. But certainly if you're starting to use individuals to carry out terrorist attacks, an individual carrying a Western passport, for example, in that case, that may have something to do with the latest era of threat reporting
out of Yemen. Eli, again, because of the Christmas attack, did you feel that this they put on a full dress rehearsal today to get out front of this story because of the surprise of the Christmas bomber?
Well, we did have in Washington D.C. an alert regarding the metro, and it just so happened that the metro, the D.C. metro system, was mentioned by Dennis Blair as one of the possible areas that Al-Qaeda might go back to. I mean, I think at a certain point in these assessments, you take it with a grain of salt. These are products of bureaucracies.
Right.
They hedge a lot of the sentences, so you rarely get anything very declarative. And I thought that the real news was that they thought that there was absolute certainty that Al-Qaeda would attempt an attack in the United States in the next 3 to 6 months.
And that certainty, when you heard it on Capitol Hill, and they know that it's going to the newspapers, that's a political risk they're taking, Eli. They're putting out.
Well, in a way, but I think also the level has been. And listen, the truth of the matter is, the other thing that they said was that yes, the underwear bomber was less sophisticated than 9/11, but lone wolf, single cell, people who've been radicalized, that are not particularly sophisticated plots, they can still do a lot of damage, and they're much harder to track in some ways than the more sophisticated operations like the airliner plot from 2006. And that was something that Blair said, as well as Leon Panetta and the other leaders of the intelligence community.
Jeremy, is that consistent with your briefings?
Well, certainly, John, if you just look at open source,
yes.
The lone wolf is the biggest threat now, because certainly Al-Qaeda's evolved from where it used to have massive terrorist operations organized with a large number of people in the cells, a large number of people carrying them out, to these very, as Eli said, very hard to detect lone wolves who essentially work very much alone, in isolation quite often, of the main cell that may carry out the surveillance and the initial pre-work. And that seems to be a trend that is coming up more and more, certainly just talking in an open source sense, in the future of terrorism, in what we expect to see of threats in the future.
Eli, again, a political assessment. The Obama administration has been prey to a lot of cross-currents with regard to national security over these last weeks. It behooves the other side to make a big deal about it. Harry Reid made a remark today that the GOP was exploiting this. Do you, from having attended this hearing today, did you see that this was outside of politics or very much in the current conversation about the Obama administration's readiness?
Politics is everywhere in Washington, and a hearing is going to have a lot of politics in it. What I would say is that the politics were on the decision to read Miranda rights to Abdul Muttalib after 50 minutes of interrogation, as opposed to kind of treating him like a criminal. That's where the politics were. On this question of the threat to the continental United States, people don't talk about it that starkly and in that plain language. And on that, you had bipartisan agreement of just sort of sitting there like, okay, this is pretty serious. I also would point out, from what I've gotten, I've heard this level of talk about concern about a wave of attacks or more attacks from Yemen and so forth for a good month now, and I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to Dianne Feinstein or Kit Bond or anybody else on that committee.
Again, I want to read from Eli's story in the Washington Times. This is Eli Lake. What is the likelihood, Dianne Feinstein asked, of another terrorist attempted attack on the U.S. homeland in the next 3 to 6 months, high or low? And the response from the DNI, Dennis Blair, an attempted attack. The priority is certain, I would say. And then, in order, Leon Panetta, DCI, Robert Mueller, director of the FBI, Lieutenant General Ronald Burgess, boss of the DIA, and John Dinger, serving for the Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research, all agreed. Jeremy Zakis, Flight Lieutenant Jeremy Zakis of the Australian Air Force in operations, and Eli Lake of the Washington Times. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.